help people to understand why should they care about public policy? It doesn't matter.
Okay, I'm going to say you should absolutely care, because public policy is reflective of what we want. If you don't make those demands, and those changes will not be heard, they will not be effective. If you do not call and make complaints of discrimination, if you don't call the office and demand education in our schools, around peace circles, around how children are different should get along, if you don't use that service, people go, next, cut that budget, don't need that. Who's calling you? Nobody calling you. You're going to report to me. You don't care about that. If you do not exercise your rights, that muscle will atrophy, that budget will go away. You need to hold your government accountable. You need to make government work for you. And so if you are experiencing discrimination, if you know somebody's experiencing discrimination, if you're a victim of any crime, you demand that you be served. You demand that government work for you. There's no reason why that should not be occurring. There's no reason in the world why we only have 35 reported hate crimes in the city of Chicago. We have under 300 reported cases of discrimination. Now you know this.
Right.
Come on. So that would be my argument.
Can I just jump in right there with Mona?
You sure can.
Because I'm going to tell you why, Mona.
I know why.
Because I'm going through a situation right now today that I studied for hours, for days. And I knew for a fact where my rights are and where they lie. And when I went to the Durson building, with all my paperwork in my hand, there's a paid legal advisor sitting at the desk, ready to discourage me from filing suit with the federal government. I know for a fact I have 3 different federal complaints. But when I sat there and told her who, because what happened to me is horrible, I wouldn't wish it on my enemy. But when you think that there's a system set up, it's a pro se, no money, legal service that I can take my case to the federal government and I can get an attorney. There is a woman, man, attorney paid by the federal government to discourage you from filing a federal case. Now, I wasn't intelligent enough. Okay, so let me just back up for a minute. If I didn't go through Affinity, right? Because I know where my power came from. I know who empowered me. Mona, Eboni, Chris, all the women that came before me, Karen Curry, Sharmili. If I didn't sit in the room and listen to all this good information about what I can do for myself, self-efficacy. I didn't know that word until I came to Affinity. If I didn't know for myself, I would lose. I would be discouraged. But I'm a fighter. There are many more women like me who don't know how to fight. And we need organizations like Rape Victims Advocate, Black Youth Project, Affinity Community Services, and God, I wish Anita Latinas would. Because we need organizations like that. What trans women go through, I had a federal marshal play with my titties, and I'm a lesbian woman. I couldn't do anything. And they were messing with me. So your issue, we're connected at the intersection.
At the intersection. That's what it's all about,
At
right?
the intersection.
At the intersection.
I would just add anybody who can say titty in the public.
I'm sorry.
I'm just
Let me say that is a challenge. That, as she said, that it's a challenge that to make the government work for us. It doesn't make what happened to you right, and when every time you do that service,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
and it makes me work harder.
Yeah.
It makes me work harder because there's no reason why government should not work for our communities or the various intersections of the communities that I belong to. There's no reason why. And every time I read that type of service, it's added to my real life. It makes me mad as to why I do this.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for sharing. just a couple of deep breaths and just get real grounded real quick. I don't know if anybody else is feeling the energy. I can see it in the room. People are actually going, yes, at me. We can feel it. So just breathe in through your nose and just one more time. Last breath. And release.
So why should people care about public policy? And the second part of the question, the work that we do. So, I think that's.
How can they get involved?
How can they get involved? Okay. So, one, I was born in 1985, so I was not around during the Civil Rights Movement or the Black Power Movement. But I do know that every single movement of today reflects on that and uses the tactics. Or somehow borrows from it, talks about history, talks about sit-ins, talks about marches, all those things. And if we are at all interested in seeing a Black freedom movement that is inclusive and puts women at the forefront and puts Black queer people at the forefront, this is one of the organizations that can do that. If we want to see that in our lifetime. And the public policies that we are invested in seeing, and we have limitations given our status, right? And we have to work in coalition with other groups for now. It affects all of our lives. Like, as the condition of Black women and children, of Black boys and men, Black queer people goes, that impacts the rest of this economy in this country. Like, this economy was largely built on unpaid slave labor, and it continues to function in a way of labor that keeps some of us down and replaces those who were at the bottom with a new group of people, and so on and so forth. Like, where there were once Black domestic workers primarily, those domestic workers are still Black, but also include other women of color, right? And so, like, we cannot talk about social justice in this country without thinking about how we're organizing young Black people to transform this country, right? So we can't do that. And the way that you get involved in this organization is that if you identify as Black and you are between the ages of 18 and 35, you can become a member of our organization. If you don't fall in that, there's still room for you to support our organization, both with your time and your money. And our organization, we are largely volunteer-led. I'm the only full-time paid staff person. People put in between 10, 15 volunteer hours a week in this organization, and these are some of the busiest young people in the country. And just like the director of civil human rights of the AFL-CIO was a member of our organization too. Like, folks who are formerly incarcerated and never gone to college are members of our organization. So it's like all kinds of people. So if you're interested in that, our website is www.byp100.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, Instagram, every social media platform that you can imagine, and we would greatly appreciate your support. If you're interested in membership or like direct support right now, you can take your information and we can go from there. Oh yeah, but it doesn't make sense anymore.
Okay.
It's fine.
Okay, all right.
So we have flyers.
I do.
So we have flyers
Yeah.
here, and I have some fact sheets here, and there's some brochures over there.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead, thank you, Sharmili.
So I mean, I think that I don't feel like I can say any more than Mona and Charlene already have about kind of the importance of public policy. The fact is that it governs our lives, and if we don't put our voices in, our voices won't be heard. So as far as, so I wanted to highlight a piece of legislation that you're going to see on your ballots come November. There are a few constitutional amendments that are up for a vote. They require an affirmative vote, right? So there has to be, because it's a constitutional amendment, they require that you're saying yes. And the amendment that I'm talking about is called Marcy's Law. It's named after a young woman in California, actually, who was stalked and then murdered by her ex-boyfriend. Her family was not notified that he was out on bail and ran into him at the supermarket 2 weeks after she was murdered, which was a violation of their rights as victims, the survivor's family. They should have been notified that he was out on bail. So Marcy's Law is a constitutional amendment that basically says that the rights that are already enshrined in the Illinois Constitution for victims, that those rights are actually enforceable. So what it does is basically say that, like, there are things that, I'll actually enumerate them. These are statutory rights, like a victim of a crime is supposed to be guaranteed a right to be notified of court proceedings. This sounds like a pretty simple thing. If you don't show up for a court proceeding, it's possible that the case will be dismissed because you are not there as a victim. If a victim is not notified of a court proceeding, they don't show up, then the case is dismissed automatically. This happens more often than we would like. Right now, there's absolutely no recourse at all for a victim if they were not notified. It's too bad, so sad. And Illinois is actually the only state in the union that does not allow for victims to go to a higher court, like to appeal, on the basis of their rights being denied. So the only change that this constitutional amendment is really making is saying that those rights that you already have, you can actually ask a judge to make a ruling on. It doesn't guarantee anything. It basically just says you now have standing in front of the court. Right now, victims don't have standing. They're witnesses. They're considered witnesses. Wow. So there are other states that have passed similar victims' rights enforcement related amendments, and it's called HJRC A1, but it's also called Marcy's Law. I do want to say, and particularly in this conversation where we're talking about crime and justice, I want to make very clear that this in no way impacts defendants' rights, okay? Because I think that, I don't think anyone is ever served by someone being unfairly punished, ever. Least of all the victim of a crime. So I want to be very clear that this does not legislatively or otherwise impact any of the rights of a defendant that they should have, and that they do have in the Constitution. So that is one thing that's coming up. It's a piece of public policy that would be really impactful to victims. And what they've seen in other states is that it actually causes the criminal legal system to move more efficiently. So things move faster, which is actually like, it's also better for everyone. Like, it's better for defendants, it's better for the plaintiffs, like, it's better for everyone in the system if it moves more efficiently. Because the longer it takes, the worse it is for a lot of folks, particularly folks who can't afford bail and are stuck in jails, for example, as so many people are in Cook County Jail. And it's also worse for victims and victims' families as well. So I encourage you to support that. In terms of getting involved, RVA is constantly doing a lot of different public work, but one thing I want to point out and highlight that's coming up really soon is that on August 19th in Daly Plaza, from 1 to 5 p.m., we are hosting the national tour of the Monument Quilt. The Monument Quilt is something like the AIDS Memorial Quilt. A lot of you know and remember about the NAMES quilt. So this quilt, though, has squares that include stories of survivors of sexual violence, with a particular emphasis on survivors who are often not centered in the story, right? So folks who have not used systems, folks who identify as trans, folks who were assaulted while they were incarcerated. A variety of stories that I think, really make up what the whole story actually is, if you're talking about sexual violence. It's incredibly powerful. I just saw a piece that was made by someone at one of our quilt making workshops, and it was like a punch in the gut. It's really powerful, incredible. The point of the quilt is to create public supportive healing space for survivors. So to really take back the idea of the public square, which is often experienced as victim blaming, and transform it into something that's actually affirming of survivors' experiences. Affinity is actually one of our partners on the Monument Quilt Tour, so we're really excited to have Affinity as part of it. And again, it's August 19th, it's Daly Plaza, it's 1 to 5 p.m. You can come by, you can just see the quilt, you can actually add to it as well. We're also going to have a specific women of color safe space There we'll have a couple of speakers, etc. So I encourage you to come by to that. And then, as I mentioned before, we have a huge volunteer pool, but we always need more volunteers. And we want volunteers from everywhere and representing every lived experience. And so there are volunteer brochures over on that table for RVA. And there are a variety of ways in which you can volunteer, not just like responding to the emergency room if that doesn't work for you. And then lastly, I think, every single one of us can actually do the work to create a culture that is intolerant of sexual violence. And that means that means speaking up when you hear a joke being made about rape. That means speaking up when you hear someone victim blaming. That means being supportive of survivors. That means holding people accountable for the ways in which that they demean and violate the rights of people in sexualized ways, whether that's street harassment, whether that's jokes about prison rape, whether that's commentary on hearing about someone having been drugged and assaulted. All of those things. There is places for you to be agents of change as it relates to that story. And we also have consent is hot, rape is not cards that are around, and please grab more than one. And they list our services on the back. And so I always say this, I hope that you never need our services. Unfortunately, the likelihood that someone you know and love will need our services is high. And we want to make sure that we're still here to be able to provide those services. So.
Thank you so much, Sharmili. Phyllis, are you full? It's a lot.
What can I say to you all? This is unbelievable. I'm proud to be part of NOMAS, the National Organization for Men Against Sexism, and through one of our leaders, Don Bell, allowed us to come in and support this conference. I have nothing to add to the words of these incredible women except do it.
Do it. Do it.
Right, just do it.